we're going to get started with the first topic, and that's going to be the Bloodstained Curse of the Moon review. Now, you've got a chance to finally play some of it, haven't you?
Oh yeah, played it for like 2 days straight now. It's one thing I like about the game though. Right away, you're right. It feels like a classic Castlevania game, and it's got like a really good, not just theme to it, but the monsters, like you said, just really feel reminiscent about the old school thing. What I like about those all the branching paths that you can take though. I mean, right off the bat.
Yeah, and to me, that's more of a Rondo of Blood kind of style. Like you got a little bit of that in Castlevania 3 with some of the branching paths, but the way that it sort of forms together feels more like a Rondo of Blood type style in that way.
Mhm.
But so I want to get into this as far as like, okay, so the gameplay is very. First of all, this is it's a budget title. It's $10. You can get it on just about any console. I've got it for both Steam and I've got it for my 3DS. You can get it for Switch, PS4. I think the Xbox One version comes out next week. So that was the only one that I think that was really delayed. But if you're an old school Castlevania fan, it's actually a really good game to get. Now, some of the other reviews that I've seen, people are praising everything about it, and I agree for the most part. This has the things that you. It's like a good nostalgia trip to a Nintendo game that never actually existed. So it's all the things that you want to remember about Nintendo, but none of the things that you don't. So there's not like, you know, flashing pixels or something like that aren't formed correctly or anything like that because it's not reading correctly in the Nintendo. It's 16:9 aspect ratio. You really get the feel of they did a true 8-bit color palette, so the characters do look like they're out of a Nintendo game, which is really cool. Now, my only, and it's not even really a complaint, it's the only thing that I feel like is a little bit of a downside is the music of the game. Now, I've heard a lot of people praise the music. It's not bad by any means. And it's by the same woman who did the music for the Castlevania games. But it doesn't seem to me to have that hook. That you know, like a track like Vampire Killer from the original Castlevania really got you like hooked into the game. And I don't feel like this game has that as far as the soundtrack is concerned. Do you have like an opinion on the soundtrack at all?
Soundtrack's like it's not bad though, but the problem is though, like when you say you're playing the game, you have songs like that are going to be reminiscent to you when you're listening, when you're hearing it, and you know, it's like you said, it's not bad, but it's not great at the same time though.
Well, I think it falls into, and it falls more into the Symphony of the Night style soundtracks, even though it is an 8-bit, chip tune type
Mhm.
soundtrack. I think it would fit better in a bigger exploration type of game, and not so much in an
Mhm.
action platformer like Curse of the Moon is. So again, like I said, the music is not bad. It's not at any point where you're like, "Oh, this is grating. I've got to turn it off."
Mhm.
But I just don't feel like it's got the hook. The way I explained it in my live stream of it was that I think they should have gotten the dude who did Shovel Knight to write a couple of tracks, get like that first level track in there, because that dude seems to really write hooks and get you like
Mhm.
into the game right away.
Oh, exactly. That's a great reference right there for soundtrack.
But overall, I think Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. I keep on wanting to call it Circle of the Moon because that's a Castlevania title.
Hmm.
Curse of the Moon. Overall, it's a really great game, and for $10, I don't think anybody could go wrong. Even if you're somebody who may not necessarily be into retro gaming, if you're just kind of curious about it, it's worth the $10 on whatever console, whatever computer you're going to play it on. I think it's worth getting the game. I would like to see more sequels to this particular Bloodstained. What's funny was that this started off as just sort of a stretch goal. This wasn't actually designed to be like the big game to get people into it, but for those of us who are old school platforming Castlevania fans, this was exactly the kind of thing that we needed. We just needed to have a good game like this, and I really want to see this do well. I think it is doing well, because that's a lot of what my YouTube feed is right now, is a lot of Curse of the Moon stuff. So I'm hoping that this really takes off, and I'm hoping we'll get some more sequels, especially at the $10 price range. You can't really go wrong with it.
Oh yeah, especially too. And for a $10 game, it feels like a very short game, but truth be told, I mean, you've been it several times, right? And
Yeah.
and you can tell definitely it has a lot of replay value to it.
Yeah, it does. So there's two settings in the game. You have veteran, which is for those of us who like the challenge of Castlevania, or you can play casual. And casual is for those of you who always wanted to get into Castlevania, but the difficulty curve is maybe a little too high for a lot of people. And so I understand that. So I played my first playthrough, and what I have on the live stream is me playing on the veteran difficulty, and that adds so much challenge to the game that it does lengthen the game quite a bit. Because I've gone back and played it on the casual, and I can just kind of zip through it that way. So it's kind of cool to have those two options, because if you still play on casual, and you can still beat the game, you still get the different versions of the story. And there are several different versions. So the way I've also explained this game is that the first game playthrough that you do really isn't the game. The when you unlock nightmare mode is really when you get into the game and really start getting into the use of the different characters. And then there's a whole nother way to play the game where you actually end up killing the bonus characters that you get along the way and collecting other items. And Sengetsu, the character that you start off with, he ends up getting more powers, and so he plays as a different character altogether, and that unlocks another mode that unlocks ultimate mode. So with ultimate mode, you get Sengetsu with all the powers that you collected, and then you can get the other three characters along in the game, and then you just keep on playing the game. It's really fun. And Sengetsu with the additional bonus powers, it's extremely fun, but then you realize when you go back to play the original game how stripped of powers he actually is. And so you kind of get used to being able to do like a double dash and a double jump and all sorts of cool stuff.
And the story though to it, is really interesting. It doesn't have the Dracula theme anymore, but you gotta admit though, Dracula is kind of played out. I mean, it goes together with Castlevania as well as anybody else. You expect Dracula in a Castlevania game, but this offers like demons and whatnot. And what I like about the fact is that maybe other iterations of the game we might have different demons, different people down the road as far as like maybe a final boss, or even in the grand scheme of things, just kind of like just the tip of the iceberg as far as like villains are concerned.
Yeah. It still sets itself in a very gothic setting, which is cool. And there are vampires in the game. There's kind of references to other Castlevania characters. Like there's one of the bosses is this lady who's taking a bath in blood, who is Elizabeth of Bathory, I think is the original person that it's based off of. But in Castlevania Bloodlines, Elizabeth is Dracula's niece, and who's kind of the driving force of bringing Dracula back in that game. And so it's a reference to her. So it's kind of cool how they've tied everything in together, but they've still been able to keep it separated enough to make it not a Castlevania game, but in the same vein of Castlevania.
Mm-hmm. And who was this person in real life that you said it was based off? This is this lady that bathed in blood. Is this a true story or what?
Yeah,
I've never heard this before.
So Elizabeth of Bathory is a woman who she was wasn't a royal exactly, but she was a highborn woman in a family, and she believed that she would have people killed, and she would bathe in their blood because she thought that would keep her young.
Damn.
So it's based off. It's kind of like Vlad Tepes. So like Dracula is based off of the same So like it's like Dracula. So Vlad Tepes, who's really Dracula, Count Dracula, Vlad the Impaler. He's a real person. Elizabeth of Bathory is a real person, but they were in Castlevania style. They tied those two together because you have these two kind of. I have a whole other thing on Dracula. Like I used to read up on Dracula, like the real dude, Vlad Tepes. And like I studied a bunch of stuff about him and what he was involved with and why he was the way he was. And I actually have a friend who's from Romania. And when I was talking to him about stuff, he was talking about how Dracula, Vlad Tepes, was actually a hero. And he's a hero in their land. And when you read about all the messed up stuff that people did to his family and him, like you start to understand why he went sort of the psychopath way that he did. So it was Constantinople and another area were fighting a war, and basically Wallachia, the Transylvania area, was a very small piece of land between those, and both of those different warring countries always kept on fighting not only each other, but they would also be invading his land, his family's land, and keep on like messing with him. So like they killed his dad, and then his brother took over, and they buried his brother alive, and Vlad Tepes had to go into hiding, and then he came back years later, and he just was like, all right, I'm desiccating everything. So he started, putting people up on spikes and stuff like that. And he really was, as far as like he was really smart in the way he handled war and things like that. And he would put people up on spikes and hang them up on spikes to like intimidate the other like invading countries. So when you really like look at it, like he saved their region several times over and had to go into hiding, and there's way too much to get into, but it's a really incredible story. But Elizabeth of Bathory is a real person who would I think it was just virgin women, if I'm remembering correctly, and I could be wrong about that, but she would have them killed, drain their blood in a bathtub, and she would take a bath in their blood.
Oh, that's just the creepiest thing I ever heard, man. That's just, you don't even put my toe in that thing. You know what I mean? No. Oh, hell no.
Hey, man, that's what, when you get into the old ways, people just believing whatever they want to with no scientific evidence or proof. That's what they did.
Yeah, I know. Stuff was crazy back then. Jesus. It's messed up.
But overall, what I'm going to recommend everybody play Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. If you haven't gotten into it yet, spend the $10. I've played it on excuse me, I played it on the 3DS. I really enjoy it on the 3DS because I like to move around and I have other things to do. But some of the things that makes the game a little bit easier is that there's save states. So every time you start a new level, it automatically saves to that level. So you're not even with the veteran difficulty, it's still not as hard as a traditional Castlevania game. Even though I think Castlevania games did have a password system, I never used them. But yeah, I think this is a good game for anybody who has any kind of nostalgia and they really want to get into a classic style Castlevania game. I'm going to say Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is a good one to get.
But definitely, especially like you turned me onto the game though. For $10, it's a great bargain. Here's the thing though too, it's not just like, oh, it's a cool game for $10. It's like I got it a few days ago, and when I get off, hours before I get off work, I daydream about going home and playing that game. That's how fun it is. You really look forward to going home, booting it up, and playing it. So it's definitely a must buy for $10. It's probably one of the best $10 you're going to spend this week.